Hey everyone, I'm Tom and welcome to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about everything I read in the month of July. And as I warned in my TBR video for the month of July, July was going to be a wild card because I was going on a pretty long vacation overseas. And that either meant I was going to read a whole lot, whether that be on the plane, in the car, before bed, anything like that, or I wasn't going to read anything. And it was the latter. I read absolutely nothing on that trip. Not even on the plane, which is normally something I do. I'm normally a pretty big, like, okay, let me read something on the plane, but this time around, I just really didn't. So that means I only finished three things this month, and one of them was a novella. So that was, very, very short. So obviously, not a whole lot read, not a whole lot to discuss and talk about, but I will just talk a little bit about my trip because why not? It was a lot of fun. I went to Britain, so we did Scotland, England, and Wales. So I guess technically we almost did all of the UK, just not Northern Ireland. And I went with my best friend. The origin of this trip was he's a massive car guy, like super into cars, always has been. And, just being friends with him and around him for so long, I am kind of interested in cars. Like I can appreciate some very cool cars, and like I know a little bit about them at this point. But he wanted to go to the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and I had no idea what that was until he told me about it. And it's basically this massive car show that happens just outside of London, at least to me. I think it's like technically 2.5 hours away from London, but in Chichester, I think is kind of the closer area that it happens in. But we decided to make kind of a whole trip out of it. We were there for about, I think it was 10 days. And yeah, started up in, actually we flew into London and then took a domestic flight from London to Glasgow, and then just kind of started our adventure there, rented a car and just drove all the way. We went as far north as like Loch Ness and stuff, and then drove all the way down into Wales and England and everything. And just it was a crazy trip. We had not a whole lot of things concretely planned, to the point where there were some nights where the day before, we were like booking hotels to stay in certain places because we had no idea where we were going to end up, what we were doing. Part of the fun of this trip was we knew where we kind of needed to be, so we just kind of would slowly say we need to end up here tonight, and then we would look on the map and just see what were things in and around our route to do. And so that was a very interesting trip and had so much fun. And then obviously the festival itself, the car show, I mean, it's much more than that, was really cool. And like I said, I'm kind of like into cars, but not really, not like a super fan. I'm not normally somebody who would like plan a trip around it, but it was an awesome event, like awesome enough that I would definitely go back to it in a couple of years and like do it again because it was super cool and everything. But that is what destroyed my reading this month. But that doesn't mean I didn't read anything. So with all of that fun stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about what I actually read. And first up, this was a book that I was pretty excited for. I think, did it come out last year and I just kind of completely forgot about it, or it came out this year and I completely forgot about it, but it got read. And that is The Faith of the Beast by James S.A. Corey. These are the authors of The Expanse, Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham. And this is the second book in the Captive Wars. I think it's supposed to be a trilogy, and there's some, I think it's going to be 3 novels and 2 or 3 novellas. And this is obviously the second novel that came out. And I like this one less than the first one. There was something about the first one that just felt super alien and like a better first contact story than a lot of other ones I've read. I liked the aspect and the angle that this first contact took. And this book, for whatever reason, I hate using the middle book syndrome, but it really did to me just feel like massive middle book syndrome, where it was just like, okay, we need to set up a few things for what's going to end up later on in this trilogy. And that doesn't mean there wasn't anything good in here, but even as I sit here now, the finer details of the book are already eroding away. And I finished it not that long ago. There were some cool moments. I think, we're learning a little bit more about this world and this universe and everything. But for the most part, it feels like a nothing burger, which isn't exactly what you want from any book. And I know this is something that gets said about middle books and trilogies a lot. I think that they have that like, oh, was it really necessary? I mean, yeah, it kind of set up some stuff. We got some falling actions, which that's really what it was. This was like our main characters have kind of settled in and we're seeing where they're progressing to now. And I think I have an idea of where the story is going to go now from this book. But yeah, it was just kind of fine to me. I gave it 3 stars. Like I had a good time with it. I'm definitely going to continue on. I'll read the novella and I'll read the last novel whenever it comes out. But I still have problems with this series, and because I found the plot and the story to be less interesting this time, I think it affected me even more. I think the thing I heard the most about the first book, The Mercy of Gods, was the lack of character work, and people weren't really super attached to any of the characters. That was slightly better here in this one, but I don't think I could really tell you any of the characters' names. That's how small of an impact they have to me in this story. And so it was an interesting, like, this series has been very interesting because obviously coming off of The Expanse, I think a lot of people expected one thing, and when The Mercy of the Gods didn't live up to that or didn't meet that and was so different and everything, I think it scared a lot of people off. But for me, I liked it. I thought it was a really interesting way to experience this first contact story. And then this one was just kind of like, it was fine. It was good. Whatever. It is what it is. But, it wasn't like, it doesn't make me want to say, hey, you're really missing out on something. I think is the best way to put it. I don't think you're missing out on anything. I think this is going to go down as a trilogy I read and that it was fine, but not probably much more than that. I do think that some of the hype that I had after reading Live Suits, which is the novella in between these two books, I was really like looking forward to this one. And unfortunately, it just didn't deliver in the way that I would have liked. Then next up, now I'm going to have to do a video on this entire trilogy here coming up, but I did finish Morningstar by Pierce Brown, and I have so much to say, not only about this book, which I can't do in this setting because it would be spoiler filled, but like I said, I think I'm going to do just kind of like my experience with the Red Rising trilogy, and I do want to have like an asterisk with that because I know there are more books. I know that this story isn't really finished, even though like it is, because if you like look at the cover of Morningstar, it says book 3 of the Red Rising trilogy or whatever. So like this was an ending at one point. And I know more stuff has come out since then, and I think that's really where a lot of the hype for the series is in that second half, because this is like this book is such a disaster in so many ways. It's just full of ass pulls. It's full of things that are just like, what are we doing? And honestly, the entire series is kind of like that. And I say all of that with like, this is technically my book of the month. I gave this 4 stars. I liked this book quite a bit, but that doesn't excuse some of the inexcusable things that I think happen in here from a storytelling perspective that I'm just like, are you kidding me? This is what we're doing? And so much of it is focused kind of in the latter half of the book, but there are other characters that I do just have problems with. And it's funny because like the writing has gotten better in each book. Like I think one of my big complaints about the first book, Red Rising, was that like it was super messy and I think the writing was really poor. And then I think Golden Sun, which is my favorite of the 3, kind of fixed a lot of that and got better. And so like the writing was still better, but there are some things in here that I just think are unexcusable in the way that they happen. And I kind of talked about this in our Discord, which is, there's a link in the description if you want to join. And I think the cope around this series is absolutely insane. I think that people are extremely protective of this, and this series is basically Fourth Wing for dudes, where if you are willing to throw out your logic, your critical thinking, and you're ready to just enjoy a fun story, you're good. But like as soon as you start to think a little bit and you like start to poke those holes, man, do they become so glaringly obvious in so many different ways. And the amount of ass pulls that are just in this series littered throughout it, it's just like eye rolling to the extent that it's like, I don't understand how an editor read some of this and was just like, that's great. And I'm just like, we got to think of something better. We got to like, I'm not a writer, so sometimes I feel funny or weird about like critiquing writing, and not that I'm really even critiquing this. I'm telling you my experience with this, but like some of the stuff that happens in here is just, it feels lazy. It feels like, I don't know. He thought this was so clever and it's so telegraphed the entire time, and just so many things like that I don't know. And it's so funny because I still really like enjoy this series. Like I'm going to read the rest of the books at some point. Probably going to try to time that out for when Red God is supposed to come out. So like I'm still invested. I still wanted to see what happens. I think the world is interesting. That doesn't mean that it's not just like a disaster at the same time. It's so funny that I feel this way because I do think sometimes people have a hard time of like tearing apart something that they like or love. I think a lot of people really love this series, and so they don't want to look at its flaws. And because I just like it, but I can see the flaws, it's fun for me to point out. And like I said, I'm probably go into a lot more detail in like my experience with Red Rising video that I'll do here shortly. That'll probably be the next video I do maybe, because I have a lot more and I want to be able to talk about specifics. So at some point that'll turn into a spoiler video, but I think, this is a popular enough series. I think people will, but like, that's my hot take, I guess, is that like Red Rising is Fourth Wing for dudes, because let me tell you, if you can look past some of the atrocious stuff that happens in here, you can look past the the atrocious stuff that happens in Fourth Wing. Like they are so similar that it's not even funny in ways that don't make sense probably to anybody else except me, which is fine. And hopefully I didn't make anybody too upset by saying all that and just kind of like, I don't know, when that video comes out, I'm going to dunk on this series way harder than I am right now because like, I don't normally curse in my videos, but like this book is kind of a steaming pile of dog shit at the same time that I really liked it. But like some of the things in here are so atrocious that like they're kind of unforgivable, and they're like I just think about them and kind of cringe and laugh and I can't believe that this is what people hold up at such a high standard. And like I said, I know a lot of that is probably the next couple books to come. But yeah, so that'll be fun when we finally get to that. And then the last thing that I'm going to end up finishing in the month of July was Platform Decay by Martha Wells. This is the 8th Murderbot book. So this is definitely one that kind of snuck up. I was trying to fill the gap between the end of July and the start of August because I'm waiting for a hold from the library to come in. So I don't really want to get in the middle of something and then that hold come in, and then I'm trying to figure out when can I finish something to start something else. So I threw in Platform Decay here, and I have to say this is a good uptick for the Murderbot series in my opinion. I forget what the last one was called, but I had like a fun time with it. It was fine. Like I didn't think it was anything special, but it was getting really, really stale. And I think Platform Decay was a step in the right direction for, we're saying returning this story to greatness is maybe a little hyperbolic. I really liked maybe the first 2 or 3 Murderbot books, but I feel like they did get kind of stale and maybe some of that magic was gone and there was some just weirdness in the series that I didn't like it nearly as much. Platform Decay, I think, is the first step in turning this into a story that is more, and we can experience something more than just kind of this quirky, fun character who's doing whatever, which was good. I still did only give it a 3-star because it was still just fine. It was good, but it's definitely, this might be the best Murderbot book I've read since like the 3rd or 4th one. So like that, to give you kind of an idea, and it kind of makes me excited or more willing to try the next book. And part of that is, I mean, they're so short, it's hard to kind of pass up. Especially when I'm listening to these on audio. Like it was like a 3-hour audio book when you adjust for what speed I listen at. And so it's going to be a series that I think is pretty easy for me to continue. And especially with the hope that I got from here, there were some changes to Murderbot itself that kind of let it be a little bit more introspective and kind of had some feeling, which is maybe not what people want, because I think something that people liked so much about Murderbot was Murderbot didn't have these feelings. It was this anxiety-ridden, kind of socially awkward creature. But I feel like when you've done that for 7 books, you kind of need to do something, or it's just always going to be the same. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, there are plenty of stories where everything's the same. I read all of Conan this year, and it's like, if you read like 3 Conan stories, you've read every Conan story. And so maybe, that was kind of the path that this is going to take with Murderbot. But I do think that some of the adjustments and things that happened in this book are going to push the series forward in a positive way, which I think is good. And then the only other thing that I have been working on is Initiate's Trial by Janie Wirtz. So I'm not done. I think I'm getting close to about the 50% way mark with this, and it's been good. It's definitely been an adjustment from what happened in Storm's Fortress and everything, and so it's definitely a reset, which makes sense. This is the start of a new arc. Storm Fortress was the end of an arc, so there's a lot of kind of like adjusting, rearranging, pieces moving, and we're kind of getting the story rolling again, which is always interesting when you're this deep into a series to kind of have to have that readjustment and get used to everything going on. But yeah, that is it. I'll definitely talk more about Initiate's Trial. Obviously, we'll have our live stream spoiler discussions about those, and when I actually finish it, I'll talk about it a little bit more. But let me know how upset you are in the comments that I called Morningstar a steaming pile of dog shit, because I'm sure that's going to ruffle some feathers, but it's just kind of is how I feel about it, while at the same time really liking it. I just like, I feel like I need to keep saying that because people are going to say I didn't like it when I did. But yeah, that is going to be all for me. I would love to know what else you did in the month of July, what you read, anything else down below. But that's going to be all for me. And remember, read what you want, when you want.